Hello, hello, hello. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Oh well, sorry about the snafu. Uh Late getting around. First things first. All right. So, all right, here we go. Hopefully this AC ain't too loud. Hello, 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 hello. Hello. Let me make track. Make a new track. Okay. And Reaper preferences. Yeah, that's up. Might have to turn that AC off. Figured as much. The noise. All right. Be right back. All right. I am back. Whew. All right. Let's try this again. All right. Ba-ba-ba. Luigi, man. Let me get that up. All right. All right. All right. Got it up. Cool. So usually when I do long form narrations and whatnot, if I'm recording something like this long form, what I would personally do is I would record like a few seconds of like room tone. First of all, make sure my levels are good. Okay. Yeah, levels are good. So I'm gonna record a few seconds of room tone. Sorry about that. My computer went haywire for a second. And let's try this again. All right. So, like I was saying before, let's see what happens. I usually like to do a little, record a little room tone. Let's see how that. Okay. All right. There we go. Much better. Much better. All right. Now that I got the room tone, now I do a little practice, reads and whatnot. Hopefully there's no issue with that. All right. All right. Back. All right. Here we go. Luigi Mangione, the new abstract painter. Try that again. Luigi Mangione, the new abstract painter. There is an odd parallel between what is written about effective counterinsurgency and what was discovered about the individual human mind. During the same period, the Cold War, the very same intelligence agencies in the United States and Britain that were overseeing counterinsurgency. There is an odd parallel between what is written about effective counterinsurgency and what was discovered about the individual human mind. During There is an odd parallel between what is written about effective counterinsurgency and what was discovered about the individual human mind. During the same period, the Cold War, the very same intelligence agencies in the United States and Britain that were overseeing counterinsurgency operations were also trying to discover the secrets of mind control. The term brainwashing was coined by Edward Hunter, writing for the Miami News in 1950. John D. Marks's groundbreaking book, The Search for the Manchurian Candidate, describes the origins of the term that developed into a U.S. and British intelligence obsession. He, Edward Hunter, made up his coined word from the Chinese xinao, to cleanse the mind, which had no political meaning in Chinese. Award-winning journalist Stephen Kinzer's book, The Poisoner-in-Chief, Sidney Gottlieb, and the CIA Search for Mind Control, describes the historical context. Americans should have been Award-winning journalist Stephen Kinzer's book, The Poisoner-in-Chief, Sidney Gottlieb, and the Award-winning journalist Stephen Kinzer's book, The Poisoner-in-Chief, Sidney Gottlieb and the CIA Search for Mind Control describes the historical context. Americans should have been able to celebrate the release of 7,200 soldiers from communist prisons after an armistice ended the fighting in Korea in July of 1953. Instead, they recoiled in shock. Many prisoners, it turned out, had written statements opposing the United States or praising communism. Some had confessed to committing crimes. 21 chose to stay behind in North Korea or China. The Pentagon announced they would be considered the deserters and executed if found. Try that again. There is an odd parallel between what is written about effective counterinsurgency and what was discovered about the individual human mind. During the same period, the Cold War, the very same intelligence agencies in the United States and Britain that were overseeing counterinsurgency operations were also trying to discover the secrets of mind control. The term brainwashing was coined by Edward Hunter, writing for the Miami News in 1950. John D. Marks's groundbreaking book, The Search for the Manchurian Candidate, describes the origins of the term that developed into a U.S. and British intelligence obsession. He, Edward Hunter, made up his coined word from the Chinese "xinao," to cleanse the mind, which had no political meaning in Chinese. Award-winning journalist Stephen Kinzer's book, The Poisoner-in-Chief, Sidney Gottlieb. Award-winning journalist Stephen Kinzer's book, The Poisoner-in-Chief, Sidney Gottlieb and the CIA Search for Mind Control, describes the historical context. Americans should have been able to celebrate the release of 7,200 soldiers from communist prisons after an armistice ended the fighting in Korea of July of 1953. Instead, they recoiled in shock. Many prisoners, it turned out, had written statements opposing the United States or praising communism. Some had confessed to committing crimes. 21 chose to stay behind in North Korea or China. The Pentagon announced they would be considered deserters and executed if found. As Marks notes in his book, by the end of the Korean War, 70% of the 7,190 U.S. prisoners held in China had either made confessions or signed petitions calling for an end to the American war in Asia. 15% had collaborated fully with the Chinese, and only 5% had steadfastly resisted. Worse, an alarming number of the prisoners stuck by their confessions after returning to the United States. They did not, as was accepted, recant when they stepped on U.S. soil. Puzzled and dismayed by the wholesale collapse of morale among POWs, American opinion leaders settled on Edwards' explanation. The Chinese had somehow brainwashed our boys. The arrogance with which American media observed the POW scandal can't be overlooked. The reality is that the United States did indeed commit massive war crimes against the Korean people. The work of Bruce Cummings and other Korean scholars very well confirms that. The notion that the Korean people did not have the right to have a unified government in which the Korean Workers' Party participated alongside other parties hardly seems to morally justify the millions of deaths on the peninsula. The United States famously threatened to drop atomic bombs on China at one point during the war, and every building above 1 story tall in the northern half of Korea was destroyed. The idea that captured soldiers, seeing this from another angle, might, after being taken prisoner, apologize and denounce the war they had been sent to fight, isn't hard to imagine without a huge dose of anti-communist assumptions. However, in the atmosphere of McCarthyism, the notion that some of the GIs may have been horrified by what they were ordered to do could not be entertained. Neither could the notion that any of the arguments of the Chinese or Korean captors were logically convincing. Kinzer noted the media response and the atmosphere that led to decades of CIA research. Newsweek described them, the American POWs, as shifty-eyed and groveling, and said they had betrayed their country in exchange for better treatment because they had fallen in love with Asian women, or because of the appeal of homosexualism. Several commentators warned they represent the weak. Sorry about that. Several commentators warned they represented the weakening of American masculinity and the replacement by a generation of pampered kids and mama's boys. Beyond the nation's spiritual decline and the feminization of its men, another theory emerged: brainwashing. Regardless, the result was CIA Project Bluebird, which eventually became MKUltra, which eventually became Artichoke. All of it was the U.S. intelligence community trying to figure out how the Chinese and Soviet communists were able to brainwash people and then to develop their own methods for doing it. Stephen Kinzer describes the project as a kind of tragic comedy in which attempts to recreate what had been seen in horror movies and TV programs resulted in the CIA harming a lot of innocent people. Kinzer writes, 2 traumatic historical episodes, the testimony of Cardinal Mindszenty during his 1949 trial in Hungary, and the behavior of American prisoners in Korea several years later, convinced CIA. 2 traumatic historical episodes, the testimony of Cardinal Mindszenty during his 1949. 2 traumatic historical episodes, the testimony of Cardinal Mindszenty during his 1949 trial in Hungary, and the behavior of American prisoners in Korea several years later, convinced CIA. 2 traumatic historical episodes, the testimony of Cardinal Mindszenty during his 1949 trial in Hungary, and the behavior of American prisoners in Korea several years later, convinced senior CIA officers that communists had discovered the key to mind control. The stories they imbibed as children and adults made those fears seem real. Lost in the blurry borderland between the fantasy and truth of mind control, they could not bring themselves to recognize the fantasy as the product of creative imagination. What the imagination could conceive, they believed the clandestine would. What the imagination could conceive, they believed the clandestine world could make real. MKUltra was an attempt to invent a new reality. As John D. Marks described the program, the CIA built up its own elaborate brainwashing program, which, like the Chinese and Soviet versions, took its own special twist from our national character. It was a tiny replica of the Manhattan Project, grounded in the conviction that the keys to brainwashing lay in technology. The program involved a number of infamous episodes, such as Operation Midnight Climax, where the CIA set up a brothel and lured men with prostitutes to a location where they could be dosed with LSD and studied. The program involved a number of infamous episodes, such as Operation Midnight Climax, where the CIA set up a brothel and lured men with prostitutes to a location where they could be dosed with LSD and studied. The program also involved the agency studying the art of harassing individuals in order to induce a psychological breakdown. John D. Marks quotes one agency veteran describing how disgusted he was. Yeah, the snap is basically if I make a mistake, I snap in the program so I know later when I do editing to pick it up from where the mistakes are. If I had a dog whistle, if I had a dog clicker, I had to use that, but I don't have a dog clicker, so I snap. All right, all good. The program also involved the agency studying the art of harassing individuals in order to induce a psychological breakdown. John D. Marks quotes one agency veteran describing how disgusted he was with the cruelty dished out to individuals in the hopes of learning how to manipulate their behavior. That's why I couldn't even take reading the files after a while. I was sickened at seeing people take pleasure in other people's inadequacies. First of all, it was dumb. For all the money that went out, nothing ever came back. First, you'd check to see if you could destroy a man's marriage. If you could, that would be enough to put a lot of stress on the individual, break him down. Then you might start a minor rumor campaign against him, harass him constantly, bump his car in traffic. A lot of it is ridiculous, but it may have a cumulative effect. Marx quotes agency insiders telling how they would capture a few teenage members of a street gang, spend some time attempting to brainwash them, and then send them to rejoin their comrades and weaken the group from within. With gang warfare, says an MK Ultra source, you try to get some defectors in place who would like to modify some of the group behavior and cool it. Now, getting a juvenile delinquent defector was motivationally not all the Now, getting a juvenile delinquent defector was not. Now, getting a juvenile delinquent defector was motivationally not all that different from getting a Soviet one. At the same time that the U.S. CIA was engaged in its mind control research, MI6 was utilizing British psychiatrist William Sargent across the pond. His ruthless sleep room experiments were revealed decades later to have resulted in at least a few deaths, as he kept people asleep for months at a time, drugged as he tried to influence their minds in their sleep. William Sargent published a book called The Mind Possessed in 1973, describing what much of his research had discovered about mind control, suggestibility, and its somewhat contradictory nature. Sargent wrote, "It is not the mentally ill but normal people. It is not the mentally ill but normal people who are most susceptible to brainwashing, conversion, possession, the crises, or whatever you wish to call it, and who in their hundreds of thousands or millions fall readily under the spell of the demagogue or revivalist, the witch doctor, the pop group, the priest or the psychiatrist, or even to a lesser degree, the propagandist or advertiser. At the root of this all too common human experience is a state of heightened suggestibility, of openness to suggestion and exhortations." He went on to write in the book's conclusion, "Suggestibility is, in fact, one essential characteristic of being normal. A normal person is responsive to other people around him, cares about what they think of him, and is readily open to their suggestion and influence. If the great majority of people were not normally suggestible, we could not live together in society at all. We could not collaborate in any undertaking. The originators of new ideas and the founders of new systems are rarely themselves normal people. If they would drop their new notions comparatively quickly in the face of the hostility of their fellows. The schizophrenic and schizoid thinker is the most immune of all to outside influences dominating his ideas. His ideas come most often from inside himself. His ideas come most often from inside himself and may be the product of hallucinations, delusions, and other abnormal thought processes which he experiences and which he tries to explain on the basis of further delusional thinking. During the war, schizophrenics were rarely upset by bombing, for instance, being far too preoccupied with their own inner turmoils and worries. Sargant did conclude that if you wanted someone to have a dramatic political or religious conversion, it was necessary to put them under stress. Persons of hysterical temperament are also highly suggestible. Hysterical behavior is most commonly the result of normal people breaking down under their Hysterical behavior is most commonly the result of normal people breaking down under severe stresses, as was seen again and again during the war. Faith healing and spirit possession rarely happen in a calm, rational atmosphere, as every witch doctor and faith healer knows all too well. Emotions must be aroused for success to be obtained. Beyond these observations on suggestibility, the CIA had roughly the same lack of real discoveries in its mind control research as MI6 did with Sargant, though John D. Marks quotes agency veterans describing the results that clearly required some rather horrific methods. He wrote, "By the time MKUltra ended in 1963, agency researchers had found no foolproof way to brainwash another person. All experiments beyond a certain point always failed," says the MKUltra veteran, because the surgeon. All experiments beyond a certain point always failed, says the MKUltra veteran, because the subject jerked himself back for some reason or the subject got amnesiac or catatonic. Agency officials found through work like Cameron's that they could create vegetables, but such people served no operational purpose. People could be tortured into saying anything, but no science could guarantee they would tell the truth. How many people were turned into vegetables by CIA operatives trying to discover the secrets of mind control? How many were tortured? The bulk of the program's records were destroyed before MKUltra became public in the late 1970s, so we will never know. On that note, I'm going to call it here for now because I want to make sure my computer's right. So, thank you for staying on with me. I know you come in with a wacky read, a wacky political narration. This is part one. There'll be more to come. Good night.